Over 31 million adults in the US have now taken Ozempic or another drug like it, which is over 12% of the population. And you can see the results all over society. Aside from facial filler, I think this might be the most visible beauty drug on the market. But not only are the effects visible physically, they're also visible in the data, with recent data indicating a slight decline in obesity rates in the US, marking the first decrease in over a decade. A study analyzing data from nearly 17 million individuals aged 26 to 75 reported a 0.15% drop in obesity rates in 2023, equating to hundreds of thousands of people moving out of the obesity category, which is amazing, astonishing, groundbreaking. A lot of us have been pushing back against things like the body positivity or the biggest beautiful movements for years because we've been pointing out how destructive these mentalities were and how deadly obesity is. So this is such an incredible turn of events. But now that the trend seems to be reversing, it seems like a lot of people are pissed. The haters have been coming out of the woodwork as of late, which honestly shouldn't surprise me because, let's be honest, Americans are a bunch of haters. Before we get started, I'm Hannah Cox. Welcome to my channel where I bring you my politically homeless takes on politics and culture. Before we dive in today, make sure you like this video, subscribe to my channel if you have not already, and of course, ring that notification bell so you never miss one of my episodes. So while we've seen really exciting movement in obesity rates, there is still a lot of work to be done. Just to be clear, in the US, we still have over 40% of adults that are obese as of last year. And let's not split hairs about what quantifies as obese for the sake of this conversation. I've seen a lot of content from people in the body positivity movement trying to do that, trying to move the line, trying to pretend as if obesity is not an actual technical definition. And I just think it's utterly ridiculous.
What's obese for you?
Like an unhealthy lifestyle.
No,
like
but what's obese for you?
Obese, like medically
me,
obese.
if you see me, you consider me obese?
I wouldn't say that you're obese,
Okay.
but it's like medically,
So,
you know.
So like for example,
you're medically obese though? Yes.
I've been medically obese since I was like 12 and I was not obese.
Well, does anybody here,
So-
would anybody here explain what they mean by medically obese? Just-
Exactly.
Like
BMI?
Like when you go to the doctor's office and you get weighed on a scale and they'll tell you, oh, you're a little bit overweight, or they'll say you're morbidly obese, you're
Because of your
whatever
height.
thing. So like if you look at me, you would be like, oh, she's a little plus size, but I am technically considered obese.
Obesity can be quantified. Obviously, the main metric that is used is the BMI, which does have some flaws, but it's still a decent metric for at least establishing where the line is. Obviously, the BMI doesn't differentiate between fat or muscle mass, so somebody who's super muscular might have a high BMI but low body fat. But come on, you know the difference. You know if where your BMI is coming from fat or muscle. And the vast majority of people who are trying to pretend as if obesity cannot be defined are very, very overtly obese. They're just deeply in denial, and that denial is ultimately deadly when it comes to this topic. I don't really think it should have to be said over and over again, but I guess it does. Obesity is a direct cause of literally all of the top killers in the US, except for one, which would be people who take their own lives. But any other thing you look at in the top 10, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, strokes, they are all linked to obesity. Not only that, but obesity is directly linked to neurological conditions and immune disorders and gastrointestinal diseases. Like the list goes on and on and on, which is why many people have said for some time that sugar should be treated like cigarettes. And I'm in that camp. It's highly addicting and it is highly destructive. So having a drug that can address this epidemic expediently is nothing short of a modern miracle.
Up until now, my strong opinion is we are in the beginning of the most effective medical intervention for obesity that we've ever seen in our lives. This is going to completely revolutionize and change pharmaceutical industry. That's how powerful these peptides are.
And yet, despite these very exciting advancements, the majority of my news feeds across every single platform I'm on, whether it be Twitter or TikTok or YouTube, is not cheering what's happening in this realm. Instead, it sounds like this. Ozempic is out of control. The amount of people who I know that are like half the size they were 6 months ago is blowing my mind. The horror. I hope we don't learn of some bad side effects down the road. Kind of sounds like you do hope we learn of some bad side effects down the road. Another person, even if there weren't any side effects, you should consider the damage it makes to your character. To your character? They go on to say, Ozempic is a shortcut for accomplishing something that could have been achieved using discipline and self-restraint. Yeah, there are a lot of things that could be achieved using discipline and self-restraint. Like I could walk myself to work every day using those same principles, but it's not a moral failing if I choose to use a car to get there. Another person, my best friend has been taking it and she's dropped a ton of weight, but her hair is falling out, her face is sunken in, and her skin is so wrinkly now. She looked better with the weight on, and I don't have the heart to tell her because she seems happy. Like, ma'am, I don't think that you are her best friend, first and foremost. You sound like an actual hater. You sound pretty jealous, is what you actually sound like. But secondarily, blaming these kinds of effects on Ozempic is really stupid and silly because anybody who loses a ton of weight is going to experience some of this. I did the keto diet a number of years ago and also experienced some hair loss that was easily reversed by taking some vitamins. And also once my body adjusted to being on that diet, those kinds of trends reverse. But if you have a ton of weight to lose, no matter how you do it, you're going to have some sagging skin probably, and your face is going to have a more sunken appearance. And it's interesting to me that that gets criticized when somebody loses a lot of weight, and yet people literally pay for facial fillers in order to make their faces look more sunken and chiseled. So it's not tracking for me, and there are very easy procedures that somebody can take once they do lose weight to address these things on top of that. So I really can't understand somebody who claims to be someone's friend posting this kind of public commentary literally ever. There's no excuse for going to the internet and saying things like this behind your friends' backs about them, especially when they might encounter it. But I think it shows very, very clearly that this is coming from a place of judgment and jealousy and not actually being concerned with your friend's health. Because no matter how you think she looks after losing a ton of weight, the period end of story result is that she is healthier and will most likely have extended her life. So you should be happy for her. Like, people want this to be a bad thing so desperately, and it's weird. Not only do I see a bunch of negative Nancys making hater content like this, I also see a lot of people whining and complaining because a lot of the body positivity influencers seem to have probably gotten on Ozempic and have started to lose weight, and that is making a lot of people angry.
Accept yourself, love yourself, and it's disappointing to sad to know that body positivity was all a big lie.
Like, of course, the body positivity movement was a lie. You must be joking, right? You could smell that cope a mile away, but at least that cope made sense because society has always been so harsh and so judgmental towards people who are overweight. So it would make sense that people who were in that camp and who felt like they had no way out of it and who felt like they hadn't seen results when they tried to do diet and exercise would create a movement to try to insulate themselves from some of that criticism and some of those attacks and to try to feel better about themselves. But now that they've been offered a lifeline, yes, of course, they are taking it, and good for them because it is literally a lifeline. Their lives were literally in danger. We have seen countless people who were in that body positivity, fat positivity movement who have literally died as a result of their obesity. So I can't fathom coming from a position of being like, well, you didn't really mean it. You chose to sell out and get skinny when you had the option to. Now, because the people who are criticizing Ozempic don't want to actually come out and say what their true problem is, which I will circle back to in a minute because I have some psychoanalysis of their entire approach. But the top list of things that they tend to give as a reason for their concern or their condemnation of this medicine tend to hinge on a few key points that are very easily debunked. First and foremost, you will hear them always talk about the negative side effects. Now, number one, I have seen many of them post side effects that they claim to be very standard, claim to be people are very high risk of these things if they take Ozempic, and then I go and I dig into it and nothing could be further from the truth. They don't even have their facts right whatsoever. But secondarily, I think this is such an odd criticism because most medicines have side effects, okay? Like if you look at the list of side effects on your Tylenol, it will freak you out. And that is because, to my understanding, when they do the trials that they have to complete on medicines, if somebody in that clinical trial develops a condition, whether or not it's directly linked to the medicine, they have to include it. So you have typically a number of side effects that are pretty standard. Most of the time, those things are not anything that are too scary or too serious. They're things like nausea or headaches or, minor inconveniences. And then you might have a number of things that are pretty serious side effects, whether they're much more rare. And then you just have some outlandish things in there that are just like, sounds like they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall and trying to cover their bases legally so they don't get sued if somebody gets one of these side effects after taking the medicine. So I'm not personally convinced, first and foremost, that the risk pertaining to Ozempic or other medicines like Ozempic are all that bad, especially compared to other similar types of medicines. I think that's just par for the course when you go on a medication. But even if you were to get all of the side effects that are included with Ozempic, I would still say the risks for getting the side effects of obesity are far greater. Like, they're not even in the same ballpark, okay? Like, if you are obese, you will have a shorter life and you will die. Like, that is just very, very clear, okay? It's very few outliers who are able to beat those odds. The numbers are in no way comparable when you look at obesity compared to Ozempic. I like this guy Benjamin said, we may find some bad side effects later on, but the side effects of obesity are pretty horrible too, so Ozempic side effects would have to be really bad to counteract their benefit. For instance, look at chemotherapy. Terrible side effects, but also cures cancer sometimes. Another person, Austin, said, the thing about Ozempic is the side effects could be just as atrociously bad and it would still be dramatically healthier than being morbidly obese. And Genevieve said, I think that if your risk of dying from heart disease, diabetes, stroke, or other obesity-related problems is under 5 years, then just maybe the side effects from this drug are worth the risk. The other thing that I think is so odd about these like doomsday people that come on and they're like, hopefully it doesn't go badly. Hopefully there's not tons of issues that fall on these people's heads. Hopefully we're not seeing tons of adverse side effects down the road, while like very clearly hoping that that is the case, is that this drug isn't new at all. In fact, it's pretty old. It's been tested. It's been tried. People have been using it for a very long time. It just got popular recently. As my friend Peyton pointed out on Twitter, clinical trials for semaglutide began in the early 2000s with similar drugs preceding it. We've been studying this drug's effect in humans for over 20 years. So yeah, we are seeing it prescribed at a much larger scale. We are seeing it prescribed in ways that had traditionally not been, but like people have been taking the drug for a very long time and the sky has not fallen. Now, to circle back to the real root cause for the haterade that we're seeing around this, I think the first and most common reaction stems from the fact that people have, for a very long time, moralized weight loss. They have really taken it to be indicative of a person's character, right? If you are overweight, then you are seen as lazy and you're slovenly and you don't have self-control and you overeat and you have bad hygiene. Like, we have all of these really bad stereotypes that we have attached to people who are overweight for some time. Some of it's fair, some of it's not fair. But at the end of the day, we've always seen it as an accomplishment if somebody's able to lose weight, because we see them as having the opposite characteristics, right? They have discipline, they have a work ethic, they are taking care of themselves, they have good hygiene, they have good practices, they have good self-control, they are eating things that we see as being more upper crust. Like, all of this is very wrapped up in our judgment of a person as a whole, which again, I think there's some truth to that. I also think that obesity is a complex disease that's not always so black and white, which I'll circle back to in a minute. But at the end of the day, we have done this as a society. We have completely moralized the weight issue. And so I think for a lot of people, there is this sense that those who are taking Ozempic to beat obesity are cheating, that they are like pulling the wool over society's eyes, that they're getting away with a fast one, that they are able to cosplay people who are affluent and upper crust and who take good care of themselves and who are naturally beautiful while never actually rectifying the internal flaws we perceive them as having. And I just think this is so odd, because I think about this in application to how we might talk to an addict, right? I do think sugar is an actual addiction, and yet we treat its diseases and its addiction properties as being a moral failing, where somebody has an addiction to alcohol or to another drug. Like perhaps we sometimes do attach a moral failing to that, but we are much more apt to push for people to get resources to help them, right? You wouldn't tell someone who is an alcoholic that they shouldn't go to AA. We wouldn't tell them that they shouldn't take a medication that could perhaps help to get rid of the cravings that they have. We see the same thing with people who have addictions to harder drugs, where they often need treatment in order to segue off of those kinds of pills and things. And we don't see people insisting that they don't seek out that kind of help. I also don't think we'd keep the same attitude towards people who have other diseases like cancer. We wouldn't tell a cancer patient to not seek treatment for a disease that was available to them, even if they were to have a type of cancer that was incurred in part due to bad habits, perhaps even habits that we see as immoral or as having some kind of a like negative connotation in society, like smoking. We still would tell them to take the treatment available to them. The list goes on and on. It's like, you guys are so weird for this, honestly. One person on Twitter said, I think people low-key want there to be grisly Ozempic stories down the line just so they can say, I told you so. And another person, Cassie, quote tweeted them and said, Ozempic provides a perfect window into the reactionary mind. Reactionaries don't want fewer fat people or longer lifespans. They want people who commit sin in their eyes to suffer, and they want them to be marked out for public humiliation. I just think this is such a negative side of human nature, and this is by no means the only place that you will see this kind of behavior on display, but there are a lot of people who just simply want others to have to do life on hard mode. And I saw a video on Instagram not long ago, I'm going to insert here, that pertains to a totally different situation, but I think it gives you an insight into the mentality of people like this.
Picture this, it's 11 years ago. I'm in a massive university intro psychology class. Everybody in my 250 person lecture is freaking out because it's the last class before the exams and none of us are ready. Professor says, you know what, you guys seem stressed. I'm just gonna give all of you a 95% blanket across the board, but you have to vote unanimously on it. He puts the poll on the board, we vote, 20 people say, nope, I don't want the guaranteed 95%. He puts another poll up that's just like, why? So option A is I selected the 95% because I want it. B, I think I could do better. C, I don't want a grade I didn't deserve. And D, I don't want somebody else to get the same grade as me, even if they didn't study as much. And all 20 people who didn't want the 95% didn't want it for that last reason. The professor said, this is the most important psychological lesson I will teach you this semester. I've been doing this experiment on classes for the past 10 years, and not one class has agreed unanimously, because there's always somebody who doesn't want someone to have what they have because they don't think they deserve it. Statistically, only 10 of you will get a 95% or above. Because in life, greed will always hurt you more than it helps you.
Now, I don't know. I sent my husband that video and we actually came down on like different sides of it. I felt like if I had prepared for the test and worked hard, then I would not want to opt into that scenario. I'd want to succeed on my own merit. I would not want to have other people leeching onto my hard work. However, had I shown up and not done the work, I probably would have been very happy to opt into something like this. He thought the people who would not opt into this period were haters and that they basically just had a gear to grind. I think when you look at the application of this to other situations, though, it makes sense when you've had to do hard work to want to have to stand on your own and to want to be recognized for that hard work and to not have others leech off of it or to maybe get something easier than you were able to obtain it. I've seen this on full display when it comes to the immigration policy debate, where you often see a lot of legal immigrants be very anti-illegal immigrant in their sentiments because they feel they had to work really hard to do things the right way, and they don't think anybody else should get an easier pathway. There's very much a sense of like pulling the ladder up behind you. But when it comes to things like obesity and Ozempic, we're not really talking about a situation where somebody getting ahead more easily than you is taking away from your work, taking away from your achievements. And I think that probably is where this mostly stems from, is people who have achieved really good health on their own. They want to be visibly seen as being morally superior, of having achieve something other people haven't, of being better than other people. And now that so many people can access Ozempic, they feel like those people are cheating and taking away from their achievements that they earned the hard way. But like I said, I wanted to circle back to obesity being a complex issue because I think people who have that mentality here are missing the mark. Not everyone can lose weight just by being good. I know that that feels like an easy recipe, right? Just expend more energy, burn more calories than you take in. And yes, that's a good recipe for success. That's one that people should try to follow, whether or not they take these medicines or not. But obesity is actually pretty complex. It's a medical condition, and it can be influenced by other things like your genetics or your hormones or your environment. And for those people, these kinds of medications can be a legitimate tool for treatment. On top of that, I really hate this idea that doing things the right way is just accessible for everyone. I have been at the forefront, I think, really dating back at least 10 years when we talk about the problems with America's food system. I've been ringing the alarm on this for so long. Our food system has been severely corrupted. We have been miseducated intentionally, oftentimes, by special interests and by our government working at their behest. People have been given completely false information. They've had products put in their food that they've then been lied to about. They have made it very, very hard for people to figure out how to do things the right way without a lot of time and money to spare. And the simple reality is that the vast majority of Americans, particularly those who suffer from obesity, who tend to have a correlation with being on the lower end of the socioeconomic scale, simply don't have that kind of time and money to expend. Like I said, I did the keto diet a number of years ago. I needed to lose some weight. I think it was in 2020, and I benefited tremendously from the country being shut down because I suddenly had the time to really start researching, to learn what the diet entailed. And it was not simple. You had to do a lot of math, actually, a lot of calculations. You had to meticulously keep track of what you were eating. And it was virtually impossible to eat outside the home on that diet. I had to cook everything from scratch. Many of the recipes took a lot longer to make because you had to use so many different kinds of substitutes. And so it was a great thing to be able to do during that time period. It was not something that was feasible for me to do for years and years to come. And that is the problem with a lot of these kinds of diets. Yeah, they work, but can somebody do that? Does it actually fit into their lifestyle? Is it realistic that they will have the ability to do that? And if not, what is wrong with them taking something that might save their lives because they aren't going to have the capacity to do so otherwise? I really do hate this component of American society where I really do think our culture hates the success story. We love it on the come up. We love to see a person on the come up. We like that pinnacle, but then man, do we hate it if they stay there. America loves to see a downfall. They love to see people fail. I cannot stand it. I've seen this replicate itself time and time again over a vast number of issues. And I think it's disgusting and gross and one of the worst aspects of our society, that need to see people fall, that jealousy that we have over people when they do hit the top. I don't know why so many people want to see others struggle. At the end of the day, I am not a doctor. None of this is medical advice, but I am a social and political commentator. And I think the evolution of the personality type that is rooted entirely in hating modern medicine that we've seen post 2020 is bizarre. There were many justified criticisms of big pharma and the healthcare industry at large during that time, many of which I made, but that doesn't mean that all medicines are bad or that everything has a catch. You should, of course, always do your research. You should talk to your physicians, but this knee-jerk impulse that we're increasingly seeing in society and in our political discourse, I think is so weird and regressive and ultimately detrimental. Personally, I have been looking into this medicine and I'm very, very excited about the potential that it has to not only treat obesity, but also treat addiction and potentially also diseases like dementia. I'll link some of the sources in my show notes that I have been digging into and that have a lot of insight into those possibilities. And I just want to emphasize that thanks to capitalism, we have seen so many incredible medical innovations over the past century alone that have increased both the length and the quality of our lives. And we need to be very, very slow to do things that will halt that progress, that will push people away from adapting those innovations when they are available to them. And we really need to keep in mind how much progress has ultimately been made in these industries. All right, guys, I hope you liked the episode. Make sure to like my videos, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And if you want even more content, you can follow me on Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram.